Yes. Hey, I'm T.A. Charlie, and welcome to The Road to Concord with Professor Joe Bakanovic. Homeroom is on Rumble. You just go to Rumble and search the channels for The Road to Concord. It's one word. When you find it, you go ahead and you click follow. It might mean you got to set up an account, but it's fast, it's easy, it's free. I did it, you can do it. For those technologically challenged members of the class, you can also catch us on Facebook and YouTube. After the show, it's uploaded to Podbean, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and BitChute. Just look for The Road to Concord. You can go to the blog page, that's theroadtoconcord.com. That's where you'll find all your show notes, study notes, and handouts for the class. The phone is working. If you don't know how to call in, email us and we'll think about it. Finally, you can email a professor at joe@theroadtoconcord.com. He's a little slow, but he'll eventually get around to emailing you back. This show is currently mainly listener-sponsored. If you are interested in advertising your business on the show, please email us. With that said, we ask for your participation on a value-for-value basis. If you find our show of value to you, then you provide an equivalent portion of your labor and treasure through the donate link on the Road to Concord blog page, the show description on Rumble, and in the comments on the other streams. And thank you to all of you who have and will support this show.
Good morning. Welcome to the Road to Concord. Today is going to be Thursday, April 9th, 2026. I'm your host, Joe Bakanovic. Going to be part 2 today on chapter 6 in our book, The Bible Amongst the Myths. Ta-da-ta-da! This will probably be the first to the last. Next week will probably be the week we wrap this book study up. There are other chapters left in the book. We won't need to read those for the purposes at hand. Remember, for those of you who might just be stumbling onto this for the first time, we're reading the book for its sociological content. Yes, it's about the Bible not being a myth, and he makes, to me, in my estimation, a very good, sound, valid, rational argument for that. In the process, he has to argue what we mean by myth and what we mean by a few other things, but in it, he's talking about, if you'll remember, the continuous worldview and the transcendent worldview. Continuous being there's only what we see, the material world is all that there is. The transcendent being that there is a realm or a world above and beyond us, that there's a creator, and this creator exists outside of time and space. So it's a oneist or a twoist worldview, according to another author. Oneist meaning everything is the same, Gaiism, the force, etc., etc. Twoist, there's a creator, and then there's everything that was created. History. Because of these two worldviews, history is seen different. In the continuous worldview, there's no sense of you have any choice in life, and you can't learn anything. History's not going anywhere. It's just an unending, infinite repetition of the same things over and over and over again. So the best you can do with history is learn omens and other things and try to figure out what's going to happen next and get in line with it so you can live the most comfortable life possible. There's no sense in that the history, the time is going anywhere, that humanity has a purpose really, or a plan is in play, or anything's being done like that. Transcendent worldview, totally different. You want to study history so you can see what people did, why they did it, how it turned out, hopefully avoid repeating those mistakes in the future. This is kind of like why Cicero said that if you don't know history, it's not that you're doomed to repeat it, you will, but Cicero would say you're doomed to live the life of an infant forever, because you're just a child. You haven't grown up, you haven't grown in understanding, and you just keep reacting to whatever happens around you, never understanding anything. And this is one of this right here is one of the biggest reasons I want this chapter 6 with history. I wanted us to study this book. The continuous and non-continuous, transcendent rather, worldview, those two are very helpful. But it's even more helpful to understand this section. and why it resonated with me. And because we're doing a book study over several weeks, it's probably not hitting with as much force as it would have if you'd have just sat down and read the book all the way through, in a week or week and a half's time. But still, hopefully you're getting something from it. And this is the point I want you to understand the most. We have people in our world today who think history is something to be manipulated, but they don't understand it and they don't care about it. They'll try to erase it. They try to use a continuous, or for lack of a better word, or another way to put it, pagan view of history. And you're going to see how this works as we continue in our reading today. And this is why, you're always talking to the left, whatever, proverbially our left. Why can't you learn from history? Socialism doesn't work. They don't care about that. They really don't. So history means nothing to them. And this is why the proverbial, well, you just didn't do it right. Yes, that's exactly how they see things. And that explains to us a lot about why we see certain types of groups of people, certain mentalities and ideologies keep repeating the same things over and over again. They are of a continuous worldview. So even if they claim to be a believer, they have not crossed over. They're not Hebrews yet. They're not born again into that transcendent spiritual worldview. So that's the setup I'm going to give you. Try to avoid that next week. Here's my Kindle reader. Whoops. Let's go right there. We left off here on the subsection of chapter 6. This is uses of information about the past in the non-biblical ancient Near East. So this is going to be continuous worldview, or what we would think of as pagan. And our author, Oswalt, says, until recent times, meaning the last couple hundred years, the enterprise of history writing has been almost entirely a modern Western phenomenon. Read that, Judeo-Christian based. This is not to say that the ancients did not have an interest in quote-unquote history, if by that we mean what happened in the past. They certainly did. But I would argue that their interest was not for the purpose of human self-knowledge or for progress toward the goal of human improvement. This becomes apparent when we see what kind of information the ancients accumulated and how they used it. Information about the human past in the ancient Near Eastern literatures is of basically 6 sorts: omen texts, king lists, date formulae, epics, royal annals, and chronicles. In each of these cases, it is apparent that certain kinds of information from the past have been gathered and organized for some purpose considered worthwhile. However, that purpose is not accurate human self-knowledge, trying to learn about human nature so that we can advance as a species rather than just stay stagnant like an animal, continuously repeating things, so that we can grow, so that we can transcend, not become like gods, like the devil taunted Eve in the garden, but so that we can become more like the Messiah, so that we can perfect ourselves to the extent possible. Not that we can make ourselves perfect, but we can become more willing to fall in line with natural law, natural order, the divine revealed laws, and universal morality, etc., by learning from those in the past. What he's arguing is that if you've got a pagan worldview, you don't care about that. If you have a transcendent worldview, that is of paramount interest to you, which is why you have the Bible and all of its history books. And it's why Yahweh rather continuously says, remember, 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 remember. Oswald's going to continue. Omens, one of the 6 types of ancient texts. Omen texts, if they do indeed have a historical basis, use historical data for non-historical purposes. An omen is a sign whose presence predicts the success or failure of a particular endeavor. Most frequently, these signs were found in 4 places: the entrails of sacrificial animals, astronomical data, terrestrial data, such as patterns of bird flight and certain weather combinations, and in dreams. The interpretations of the various conditions were contained in documents devoted solely to that subject. How much attention was given to this concern is indicated by the fact that the Babylonian omen texts run to some 70 volumes. Such an omen text might read, and here he's going to quote one: if the liver is raised up and protrudes, the prince will go forth in power. If the gallbladder is short, a foreigner will rule the throne. If the teeth of the aborted animal protrude, the days of the king are at an end, and another will sit upon his throne. These are all just omen texts. The texts do not specify where these interpretations come from or came from, but some scholars believe that they were derived from observations of the results when these same kinds of signs had appeared in the past. Thus, given the principle of continuity, if the sign appears again, it is possible to predict that the same result will also occur again. So that's omen thinking. This sign means this is going to happen because they think everything repeats itself in patterns. Obviously, there is no attempt to understand the effects and implications of human choices in this matter. In these matters, I'm ad-libbing a little bit here. Human choices have nothing to do with the outcome, and it is impossible to do anything to improve on that outcome. This material may indeed involve quote-unquote history, but it is not history writing by any stretch of the imagination. This is something that I have started, now that I'm looking for it, these folks with continuous worldviews, this is why I want to point this out. This is why we're doing this study. Have you ever listened to news or podcast or any type of somebody public speaking with, well, you've got bad socio-economic outcomes, so therefore you're going to be stuck in poverty, and that means you're going to be this way or that way, as a person. You're going to be violent. You're going to be a thief. You can excuse theft because it was, you had no choice. You're poor, so you're going to be a thief. That type of thinking. Or you're poor, so you're going to be stupid. Or you're poor, so you can't figure out how to get an ID card to vote, et cetera, et cetera. Or you're stupid, so therefore you're going to be poor. But these type of things, they make causal connections that don't necessarily, in fact, don't objectively connect. It is possible for, just 100 years ago, just because you were poor, it was not an excuse to be unkept, uncivilized, lawless, a liar and a thief, and to live in squalor. You still, in the Great Depression, the people living in shanty houses, they still tried to dress as well as they could. They still prided themselves on not taking handouts or welfare or stealing. Not everybody, but the bulk of the society did. So this idea that we have today that, well, you didn't have a dad, so blah, 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 or you had an abusive parent, so you turned out to be, some sort of pedophile or a rapist or something. These cause and effects that way, that's continuity thinking. That says you have no control over your destiny or how the fact that you were born into that's it. That controls how you're going to be as a person. That's continuity thinking. Now, if you think about this, I guarantee you've seen this in our world today. That's actually the prevailing view within our government and teaching institutions, in our entertainment media and things like this. This is why you have gun control. Guns kill people. No, they don't. People kill people. What tool they use to do the killing, guns can make, we got to get rid of them because of mass killing. Well, so does sarin gas or a bomb. So if they want to kill a lot of people, then they'll wait for a crowd of people and run you down with an SUV. Got to get rid of SUVs. SUVs kill people. That's continuous thinking. That's pagan thinking. Remember, the continuous worldview of continuity, it's pagan. That's the definition of paganism. You have a continuous worldview. No, Joe, I'm a Christian. No. If you actually have a continuous worldview, you call yourself whatever you want. You can't possibly be a follower of the Messiah and his Father because you haven't transcended. You're not of a transcendent thinking. So to them, they're just, to you as a continuous thinker, the Messiah and Yahweh, they're just different gods. They're just two more of many gods in the world. You're a polytheist, even if you say you're not. This is by definition. It's one of the reasons I like this book. You cannot argue with the definitions. I mean, you can, but it isn't going to get you anywhere because form and function define, and you can't change the form and function. He continues, king's lists. King lists seem to constitute a kind of national genealogy in that the name and duration of the reign of each king is recorded. Even the Bible does this. Here is an example from Sumur, This is an example from ancient texts. When kingship was lowered from heaven, kingship was first in Eridu. In Eridu, Al-Lilium became king and ruled 28,800 years. Al-Algar ruled 36,000 years. 2 kings ruled it for 64,800 years. I drop Eridu because its kingship was brought to Bad Tibira. These are 5 cities. 8 kings ruled over them for 241,000 years. The flood swept over. After the flood had swept over, when kingship was lowered from heaven, kingship was in Kish, etc., etc. This is, again, we may say that there could well be accurate information about the past here, at least in regard to the names and places. But this is not history writing as we have defined it above. There is no attempt at evaluation, and given the fantastic lengths of the individual's reigns and some of the documents, like 36,000 years for one king in the Sumerian list, we may doubt whether historical fact was a major concern. As noted above, the information was probably preserved as a kind of national genealogy. Then you have date formulae. A third genre that illustrates the ancient Near Eastern use of information from the past is date formulae. Here, each year of the reign of the king is given a title, presumably based on some royal accomplishment during that year. Here are some examples from the reign of the old Babylonian monarch Hammurabi. 1. Hammurabi became king. 2. He established justice in the country. 3. He constructed a throne for the main deities of the god Nana in Babylon. 4. The wall of the sacred precinct of Gagaya was built. 5. He constructed the Enka Asbara. 6. He constructed the seer of the goddess Laz. 7. Uruk and Isin were conquered. 8. With the mighty power which Anu and Enlil had given him, he defeated all. 9. His enemies as far as Sabartu. As with the king's list, it seems likely that there is historical information contained in this formulae, but there is no analysis or evaluation and no basis for a better understanding of humanity or the human condition. Therefore, it doesn't really meet historical writing or the definition that Oswalt worked out of historical writing. And like all good philosophers, he worked out and reasoned his definition, and he was using form and function to give you a definition. So that's what we're working from. So now he's going to make his case. Epic. Another type of material relating to events in the past is the epic. Epics are typically narratives of certain events in the life of a hero, such as Gilgamesh in Sumerian literature or Ulysses in Greek literature. Many scholars now believe that these heroes and those of other national epics were historic individuals, and that the legendary episodes told of them in the epics had an original basis in fact. Presumably, there was a Ulysses who fought at Troy and had a difficult time getting home. So also, it seems likely that there was a king of Uruk named Gilgamesh who was something of an adventurer in early life, but became more of a philosopher later on. But to agree to these hypotheses is far from saying that the epics are historical in nature. In fact, the significance of the heroes is precisely that they have been lifted out of the narrow confines of a specific history and made representative of figures. The epics are, in fact, light philosophy in narrative form. They use well-known figures from the past as a vehicle to present some rather profound reflections on the meaning of life. But they can only do this by taking from the hero the mundane, specific details of his life and then projecting him on the larger screen of general humanity. He is only useful for the purpose of the epic if he is removed from the particularity of one prescribed human life and is elevated to the level of every man. Need to stop and unpack that just a minute. In case you don't remember previous chapters, when he's explaining how the continuous mind thinks of this. I cannot write about George Washington and how he was a great man and how his character and nature shaped the foundation of this country and how the people rallied around him and why they wanted it. I can't write about that. Not in a continuous worldview, because that makes Washington special. And it means that the way he did things affected the outcome of history. But to the continuous world mind, that's nonsense. That doesn't work. So the only way I can make Washington applicable to anything is to make up stories about him and then apply it to everybody. So rather than Washington being a good, virtuous, honest man, I make up the story of Washington chopping down the cherry tree. And then I can tell no lie, and I can apply that to everybody. Now it's a story I can give to everybody. And I can blanket apply it to all of humanity rather than let it focus on one person. The purpose for this, the reason for this is to deny free choice, because with free choice comes accountability. And the continuous worldview mind does not recognize or want to accept accountability. Therefore, they reason it away. And that prevents them from ever understanding history. If you don't have accountability, you don't have history. It's history in the sense that's something we can study. Oswald continues. He says, why do the epics make the hero a representative figure? They do this because of the principle of continuity. A specific individual is of little significance for general truth. The very thing that makes him or her specific are the things that are unimportant. It is insofar as the individual exhibits the characteristics of all humanity that he or she becomes significant. Thus, those who adhere to continuity have little interest in the unique individuals and events. The very elements that are of interest to the history writer are of least interest to such a person. So if I have somebody who goes from rags to riches, the continuous thinker does not want to hear about how they did that. What is it about that person that helped them to do this? I don't care about that, because that doesn't apply to every human being. So I don't want any type of ideal to which I can ascribe or aspire. I need to explain everything in terms of something, some ubiquitous god of economics. And because the god of economics frowned on me and I'm poor, that means I've got nothing I can do. I'm just going to waller and squalor my whole life. And the best I can do is learn to be comfortable, which means it's justifiable to steal, because that makes me more that type of thinking, which justifies socialism. And this is not a transcendent. This is not spiritual thinking. This is all animal materialistic thinking. That's the continuous mindset. Oswald's going to continue here. He says, thus, Gilgamesh and Ulysses and other heroes are deemed too important to be left in real time and space. They must be lifted out and made representative of all humanity in the timeless cycle of existence if the quote-unquote truth of their lives is to be known. But in a historical understanding, it is precisely the uniqueness of the individual that makes him or her significant. It is not participation in their life that is important. Rather, it is what may be learned from their particular experience that may be applied to our own particular experience that is vital. Such an understanding cannot exist apart from a worldview of transcendence. And that's because only the transcendent worldview will see and understand that you have free will and you can have choices about your destiny and the way the world around you works and how it affects you and you affect it. And you can learn from the past so that you can avoid mistakes of the future. That's transcendent thinking. That means history is going somewhere. It doesn't mean you're stuck in a cycle that you have no control over. Oswald, it is true that the epics, that in the epics, a much greater interest in human self-understanding is manifested than in the previous three genres. Given the conditioning to which continually necessarily submits us, continuity necessarily submits us, how shall we live? This is the question that thoughtful people address to their world. The answer is that we should live with courage, nobility, and shrewd wisdom. There are realities that we cannot change, but we can decide how those realities shall meet us. And this is, in other words, learn to live with what you have. Something that, if you pay attention, the continuous worldview of today can't do. They argue for it. They try to deal with it. They're stuck in that thinking, but they're still trying to force their will and a change of realities onto the world. But they always do it in ways that don't work because of their trap in that continuous worldview thinking. It's a form of madness. Yes, it is literally a form of insanity. That's what I'm saying. Does this not explain some of what we're seeing in the world today? Oswald continues here. In this regard, it is interesting to compare Gilgamesh to Ulysses and then Ulysses to the Greek dramas. It is possible to see an interesting refinement in the character development, in the plot line, and in the way questions are addressed. Nevertheless, the Greek dramas are not historical. However much we may admire Antigone's, or whatever her name, courage and nobility, and however much we may sympathize with her in her dilemma, there is no question of her being a historical personage or the drama recounting her actual life and decisions. Then another ancient form of quote-unquote history writing. In the fifth type of material, the royal annals, we find much better examples of thoroughgoing kind of a collection of records and data from the past. Those from Assyria in the first millennia BC are best known, but there are excellent specimens from several other ancient Near Eastern nations as well. These annals record in considerable detail many of the events in each reign. Sweeping military victories and the completion of vast building projects are favorite topics. Interestingly, defeats and failures are never reported. In every event, the king is central, whether as strategist or as tactician. In other words, this is early propaganda. The annals were typically inscribed on the walls of the temple of the major deity of the kingdom. Here is an example from the annals of Sargon, an Assyrian king from 721 to 705 BC. It says, I besieged and conquered Samaria and led away as booty 27,290 inhabitants of it. I formed from among them a contingent of 50 chariots and made the remaining inhabitants assume their positions. I installed over them an officer of mine and imposed upon them the tribute of the former king, Hanno, king of Gaza, and also Sibi, the vizier of Egypt, set out from the Rapihu against me to deliver a decisive battle. I defeated them. Sabera ran away, afraid when he heard the noise of my army, and has not been seen again. Hanno I captured personally. These royal annals have been a great value in the reconstructing the history of the ancient Near East. For instance, they list with great care the names of all defeated nations along with the kings and officials. This has been helpful in working out the political topography of the region in various periods, as well as making it possible to reconstruct the chronology of the first millennia BC. Of course, the annals are most useful when we have parallel records from two opposing nations and the two can be balanced against each other. For instance, when both claim to have visited a resounding defeat on the other in a particular battle, the likelihood of a draw begins to suggest itself as actual fact. But in spite of the significant amount of historical material the royal annals contain, they cannot be considered to be history. The chief reason is their purpose. They exist to glorify a king, not to promote more accurate understanding of the world in general and of humanity in particular. Thus, they are accurate and complete only insofar as what is reported reflects favorably on the king. But that by the same token, there is no attempt to evaluate behaviors in order to discover which were successful and which were not. Sound familiar with our socialist friends? Everything's good if it sounds good to them. Everything's bad or somebody else's fault if it doesn't do well for them. From the analyst's perspective, everything that the king did was successful. Furthermore, there is no standard beyond the achievement of that king's particular goals by which to make a judgment as to success or failure. For this reason, the annals can be considered to contain historical data, but not to be actually historical. I'm thinking here, how many times have we had presidents in recent times say that they had the greatest economy, blah, 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 but you're old enough to remember when the media was telling the economy sucked. Or we're told that this person had a sucky economy, but you're old enough to remember that the economy was doing good while you were under those years of that leader. These type of things. That's annals history. One president's supporters will believe that everything he did or she does, succeeds. And others would be like everything they did succeeds. And you got to kind of read between the lines and figure out what really happened, because neither of them are reporting history. It's propaganda. Oswald continues. The purpose of glorifying the king is certainly one of the reasons why the annals do not report defeats and failures. But another reason such events are not reported is related to the principle of continuity. To record failures and defeats is to run the real risk of causing them to be repeated. If reports of the kinds of things the king does not want to happen again are suppressed, and reports of the things he would like to see happen again are recorded in some detail, the risks are minimized. Therefore, don't talk about socialism's failures, because if you do that, you might cause it to fail again here while I'm trying to run things. That's continuous thinking. It's superstitious. How's that sound? All right, I'll tell you what, right here, close enough. We'll take the bottom of the hour break here, 3 minutes. We'll come back. We'll continue reading and see how far we get today. We'll need one more week after this to continue, finally finish up with this chapter. See you in 3 minutes. I need a new keyboard. I tried to type a message in there and it just doesn't want to come out right. That little ditty reminds me of the Buzz Lightyear ride at Disney. It's the theme music as you're getting on the ride. I don't know if you've been there or not, but I haven't been to Disney since 2019 when they changed all the rules after COVID and they went totally communist on me. And I just I'm not going to go back. They charge too much anyway. So it's pagan world over there anyway. So anyhow, back to our little book here. Chronicles. So the last of the 6 types of ancient writing that people would argue are history, but Oswald's arguing don't fit the definition of history writing as we understand it. He says the genre of ancient Near Eastern literature that most nearly accords with what we think of history writing is the chronicle, found primarily in the so-called Babylonian Chronicles series. You also have that in the book of the Bible, the Chronicles, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, for this reason. In its complete form, this series encompassed the history of Babylon from the beginning of the Neo-Babylonian period, New Babylonian period, until the middle of the Seleucid period. So this is 747 BC to 226 BC. Unfortunately, it's not complete. Unlike the Annals, which had a heavily propagandistic motive, the Babylonian Chronicles exhibit a much more objective tone, recording defeats as well as victories. The focus is largely on the kings and their succession. As Sparks says, quote, they seem to exhibit a genuine intellectual interest in the history of Babylon itself, unquote. But even here, the purpose behind the recording is not clear. Sparks suggests that it is another example of the penchant for lists amongst the Mesopotamians. And you'll find this in the whole region. The Bible also tells us about the Chronicles of the Kings, or the Wars of the Kings of Israel. That's not First and Second Kings. It's a book that's been lost to us, which would seem to fit some of this other genre, annals, history writing, and everything. It's a cultural overlap between the Hebrews and the people around them. And this is part of why we've studied the culture from which the Bible comes from. Helps us better understand how it was written, the people who wrote it, and how they communicated thoughts and ideas. Oswald continues, he goes, here, in this case, Chronicles, here, it's a list of kings and their accomplishments, but without any real attempt to evaluate the significance of these accomplishments. Again, we are left with a collection of historical data, but not a history, an evaluation of things. Reasons for the absence of history writing. Focus on now. Here's where we really start to get to the point that I think is useful for us in our world today. If we agree that there is no history writing per se in the ancient Near East, or in the Far East for that matter, we may ask why. The answer, I believe, lies in the worldview of continuity. In the cycle of existence, all that matters is now, and its continuation in the most comfortable, pleasurable, and secure manner possible. Since all things recur endlessly, there is no future different from the past, and there is no past from which the present differs. In such a circumstance, study of the past for the sake of improvement of the present and the future makes no sense. One can only hope to discover a pattern reoccurrence in the past that will either illuminate similar reoccurrences in the present or perhaps facilitate the reoccurrence of positive patterns. The idea that the past could be in any way transcendent would be not only nonsensical, but even more subversive. This is why progressives do not want to look to history, because history in its transcendent form and understanding destroys their worldview. Now, this is where I want us to understand something. Have a little compassion for them. Not a lot, but a little. When I say it destroys their worldview, you are literally talking about destroying everything that brings them any sense of security or understanding of how the world works. They can't allow this. Okay. I don't know how to explain this. And this is a case of my brokenness. I don't know. Intellectually, I understand this. Emotionally, I don't know how to connect. It'd be like finding out you're adopted. Okay, that would be one of the shocks. A lot of people, that destroys them. Me, I could care less. It's got nothing to do with who I am and where I'm going in life. I'm broken that way. A lot of people, it would really mess with them. It's that type of earth-shaking, worldview shattering thing. To somebody who's got a continuous worldview, if you force upon them the idea that the past can and should direct the future, then that means they're responsible for what they're doing. And if you're responsible, and the things you're pushing, not only in your life, but on the lives of others, are making things objectively worse, then all of a sudden you're accountable for what is now in their mind understood to be evil. And now they'll see themselves as a source of evil or a devil or something like that. Most people will shut down or push it away or deny it or refuse it. And this is one of the biggest, this is, the Bible explains this. Either you're of the spark of life or you're not. And for most human beings, it's easier to just fall back to being an animal. Like Peter says, senseless, animals with no understanding, good for nothing but to be led to the slaughter. Judgment Day slaughter. Yes. We never transcend. This is the biblical blue pill, red pill from the Matrix series. When you are born again and you transcend, you transfer from this worldview to the spiritual worldview, the transcendent, from the continuous to the transcendent worldview, that's born again. But once you're born again in the transcendent thinking, now you understand free will and accountability. And now you have to live differently, because what you do is driven by the past and affects the here and now as well as the future and other people, and you're accountable for that. A lot of people don't want that responsibility. So there's comfort in living like an animal, because you can just tell yourself, hey, an animal's not responsible for what it does. These type of people may not consciously see themselves this way. That's why I said have a little compassion for them, a little, because in the end, ultimately, they are transcendent beings. But if they choose to live like an animal, they're going to the slaughter, which is Judgment Day. So hopefully this will start to help some of you see the struggle in our world in different light, different eyes, spiritual eyes, transcendent eyes. And it'll hopefully also give you a filter through which you can evaluate not only other people and other organizations and what folks are doing and why they might be doing it, but also yourself as well. Am I thinking transcendently or am I thinking continuously? And make choices for yourself. Okay. Transcendent is essentially just saying that you recognize there's a capital T truth, an objective truth, and that truth, the source of that truth, is the transcendent creator of this universe. And if there's a transcendent creator and he has established objective truths, we are responsible to get in line with those objective truths, both for ourselves and for others. And this is one of the things that the continuous mind, today you want to put it a different way, the progressives or the liberals, not classic liberals, but left-wing liberals, this is one of the things that to which they're reacting. That transcendence means nothing to them. Oswald's going to continue this subjective orientation. That means it's only going to be important to you how you see it. He says the worldview of continuity also dictates what we may call a quote unquote subjective orientation. As we have seen, history writing calls for an outside perspective on a person and events, the possibility of abstracting oneself in some sense, even if limited, from what one is describing in order to allow the data to say whatever they will. In other words, step outside of what you're dealing with to the best of your ability. But in continuity, there is no outside. This is important. That's what it means to be transcendent. If you want to be objective, you have to train yourself to take the transcendent position, step outside of time and space and look in as though you are standing next to the creator. You're not him, but it's kind of like mimicking what he does. You're on the outside looking in. To the continuous worldview, there's no such thing as an outside. There's only the inside. They can't see outside the walls of their house. Oswald says, what matters is not discovery, but maintenance. Reality is about me and mine, so whatever works to promote our goals, desires, and continued existence is necessarily good. This explains the personalization of the forces of the cosmos. All objects are viewed personally. In fact, there are no objects, thus there is no object of thought. Nothing is considered for itself apart from its impact on me. Ultimately, it only has existence as it relates to me. Your truth is your truth, mine is mine. The idea that our good could be promoted by something outside of myself, ourselves, is utterly foreign to the worldview of continuity. Ultimately, the only valid response is, how do I feel about this? Now, does that not describe wokeism in one sentence? How do I feel about this? That's continuous worldview thinking. And it also comes down to one of the things that you will find if you read about the early 20th century progressive movement, the 20 in the late 19th century. You're going to see that one of my books is even titled The Quest for Order. And what it is they're trying to enforce order on the world to protect themselves from the insecurity of the continuous worldview. They're trying with a continuous mind to become gods, materialistic gods, like a god king. The end result is they end up being dictators. But that's their quest, and it's driven out of fear. Fear that if they can't install this order, they're going to live, in an uncertain world, live in fear, open fear, not knowing where their next meal is coming from, or being enslaved, blah, blah, blah. Bad things are going to happen to them. So they're trying to institute order on the world around them. And if they can do that, that makes them morally superior. Because now this is where that idea that they're smarter than you, therefore they have a moral obligation to save you from yourself. That's continuous worldview thinking. So Oswald says here, multiplicity of causes. It says, furthermore, in the worldview of continuity, there is an almost unlimited multiplicity of causes. If ultimate reality is a mirror image of proximate reality, then reality is irredeemably multiple. Looking at the world around us in that light, we can see that any attempt to understand why anything happens is foolish. There are literally thousands of divine forces at work in the world, all shaping what we do in a myriad of ways. The idea that human choices in the past has any influence on what is happening in the now simply does not rate consideration, not in this mindset. It is inherently more likely that it is the position of the stars that explains what is happening in the now. So this is why the continuous mind view doesn't look to the past for help, because you can't know other than the omens. And that's just going to tell you what might happen. You can't know in their worldview. That they'll say, well, I tell you, well, this attempt at socialism isn't going to work. You don't know that. You can't know that. Everybody else did it wrong. And that's where that thinking comes from. Determinism. This latter point brings us another factor growing out of continuity. This is determinism. Given the cyclical and interconnected nature of reality, choice is merely an illusion. We really have no choices to make. This is a common refrain now in so-called science, that we really have no free choice. Free choice is an illusion. This is something I've been seeing a lot lately. Oswald says, everything we, quote unquote, choose to do is dictated by forces outside of ourselves. See, you're not at fault for anything. Just as a cog in a machine has no choice in how it participates in the actions of the machine, so a person will do what their place in the machine of the cosmos dictates, whether they are aware of it or not. To be sure, if one can understand the motion of the machine and how it impinges on one, then it might be at least possible to cooperate freely and minimize friction. Thus, we have the part played by the horoscope. You can fight your fate and be crushed, or you can cooperate with it and be more comfortable. Let me explain this one to you just a little bit better. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams. In there, in the movie, he's teaching or trying to teach English to some Vietnamese citizens, because he's in Vietnam. He's trying to teach English to them. And there's one older guy in there, and Robin Williams is trying to make a point to him about fighting back, fighting for yourself, how to live a transcendent concept of the world. And he says, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? I'm stabbing you. I'm putting a fork in your eye. You're about to die. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? And the old man says, I'm waiting to die. That's continuous worldview. He's accepting his fate. That is a very Asiatic, an Asian mindset. Very Asian in that it's very continuous mindset. That is Zen. That is yin and yang. That's that mentality. That's the force. Become one with the force. That's a continuous mindset. That is not a biblical perspective. And if you have that mindset, You're trapped by a cage that you built of your own making. But the problem there is for somebody to accept the transcendent worldview, not only do they have to face the fears of being outside of that trap, you know, a dog that's raised with kennels, we see that kennel as a cage. That dog sees it as safety. And he'll run to that. If he's been raised with the kennel since birth, he'll run to that kennel for safety, even though we see it as a cage. That's the thing. The continuous mindset doesn't want to get out of its cage, out of its kennel, because it's uncertainty and it's fear and it's they've got nothing else to grab onto. They're all of a sudden adrift in an ocean without a life preserver. So I have a little sympathy, a little understanding, a little compassion for these folks, but not a lot. Not a lot, because they still have an intellect. They should still be able to reason their way through this and choose what I see as a more correct path, a better path, based on an accurate recording of history, faith, reason, everything, based on the offer of the witness of Scripture and the people in it. But, you know, that's me. Oswald's going to continue here. He says, I vividly recall overhearing a young woman telling another young woman about her divorce. She said, we should have known better than to get married. Everybody knows a Leo and a Capricorn can't live together. Obviously, if there is no genuine choice, there is no responsibility, which is generally comforting. See, you can't go to hell if you're not responsible, right? But neither is there any point in studying those actions with a view to understanding how they affect the outcome. The outcome is predetermined. So why worry about history? Preoccupation with order and security. Now, this is at the heart of the progressive socialist mindset, the continuous worldview, one world order, Babylonian, let's make a name for ourselves so that, you know, Yahweh can't destroy us again mindset. That's what this is all about. It says there is also in the worldview of continuity a preoccupation with order and security. That is because it is clear on the principle of analogy that the cosmos is a battleground between opposing forces, not just good and evil, but more than that. The forces of construction versus the forces of destruction. Chaos is always hovering about us, whether physically, materially, or politically. The ultimate goals of comfort, pleasure, and security are completely dependent on the continual victory of order. On the surface, at least, time spent in a study of human action in the past, particularly unique, non-repeated ones, seems to have no payoff in assisting the victory of order. Rather, it seems likely that the intensive study of recurring patterns of nature, society, and the human psyche would yield much more information about how to get oneself in line with those recurrences in such a way as to experience a maximum of order. And hence the biblical cycle, you know, the pagan cycle of the reoccurring sun god and the death of the sun god with the winter and spring and summer cyclical natures. This is where I'm going to stop for the day. Charlie, you want to join us for a minute? Comments, thoughts, suggestions? I know you've read the book.
Yep.
Does this
Thinking
help
about people in my life and how they view things, and I'm like, yep.
So you can you can see the value in what Oswald's doing here is that it's explanatory, is it not?
It is, but my question would be, how do you get somebody that is in the continuous mindset to see these problems?
You and I can't. That's the Holy Spirit's job.
Yeah, I guess I guess that's where our work stops. We can present the information, but only Yahweh can bring them out.
See, that's another thing.
Yeah.
If I, like with the Bible, if I read this book with a continuous mindset, mind view, worldview, I wouldn't understand what you and I are seeing in it.
No, you would not.
No. The reason it's valuable to us is we already have a continuous worldview.
Right.
If you don't have that, that book is going to be nonsense to you. It will. Just like when we say capital T truth, that'll be nonsense to a continuous worldview individual. Transcendent. Transcendent. Who's asking the question?
I think you said continuous worldview, and
Oh,
you may have been.
yeah. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
My mouth is behind my brain again. I apologize, folks. If you've been studying with me for a while, you know that happens to me a lot. You have to have that transcendent, born again, crossed over worldview in order to understand it. If you have a continuous worldview, you're not going to see these things. You can't. You can't. So, like when I say capital T truth, you can't understand what we're saying. And I'm not saying you're stupid. Those people, there's a block. It's what the Bible calls blinders. You have scales over your eyes.
Yeah.
Your worldview prohibits you from seeing it. You cannot see beyond the walls of the cage you've built.
Yeah. And I guess when you were talking about, we need to have a little compassion, but maybe we need to have a little bit more than that, because, I'm looking at these individuals that I know that have this worldview, and they're miserable.
Yes.
They're absolutely miserable, because I guess they view themselves as just victims in this world, because the world is just against them, and they can't do anything to fight back against it, I guess, from their viewpoint. And that is just, oh man, it's horrible. If you have a transcendent view, you're like, okay, well, I screwed up yesterday, and this is why this happened to me. So maybe next time I should do things differently, so that maybe the outcome will be different.
India has a caste system. Let me see if I can use this. You got upper and lower class. That thinking, that idea, like I just saw a story today that some lady up in the Midwest somewhere is telling all of her constituents, rich people are your enemy. The idea that the rich, and the poor are enemies of each other, that's the same thing like in the caste system. But in India, if you're lower class, you're just dung of the earth. The best life is to learn how to just accept it and live with it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a continuous worldview. The same thing with the people here, now their idea is, well, we got to destroy the rich. That doesn't fix your problem, because your problem is mentality and culture. Your culture driven by the mentality of the people that are doing it. So let's say I'm stuck in the lowest of the low class of India, but I have a transcendent worldview. Well, how am I going to change things in my world? Well, I'm going to leave India. What? I can't change that nation.
No,
but I can change where I am on the face of the earth. So I'm going to sit and I'm going to decide this is the best place for me to go. And if necessary, I'm going to get there by walking. And yes, I may have to illegally enter into a nation, but I'm going to go somewhere where I can find a way to become legal, because that's what I need to do to succeed in that society. And I'm actually going to start doing what's necessary to affect the outcome of my condition in this life. I'm going to take responsibility for my condition. This is why the poor stay poor. Continuous worldview. They just learn to accept their lot in life, and they used it to justify everything that they do. And whereas somebody with a transcendent mind, worldview, says, you know what? I'm poor because I have different priorities and I spend money on things that I shouldn't, or because I haven't improved my skill set so that I'm worth more money to my fellow man, or because I'm lazy, or because this, that, or the other thing. You might be poor for no other reason other than you got to get yourself the heck out of New York City or LA.
Yeah. Oh,
your skill
LA.
set may not be enough to earn money to live there, but if you move to a different state, the exact same skill set will buy you a living.
Yeah.
It's your fault if you stay there. Oh, well, I want to live here. That's irrelevant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And this is why I'm not going to have as much sympathy for him as Charlie might, because I am intolerant of people who are stuck on stupid. And I know they tell you can't cure stupid. Not with that attitude, you can't. But my drill instructor had a way to cure stupid.
Yeah.
If you make it hurt enough.
Yeah, if you make it hurt enough. Yep.
Which coincidentally, Benjamin Franklin said the best thing to do for the poor is to make them uncomfortable in their poverty.
Yes, I love that quote.
That is not being hateful. That is is a true agape love.
It is. It is. Yep.
That's a godly love.
Yep.
So make you uncomfortable in the poverty of your sin, or in the poverty of your spiritual filth, or in your material. You help somebody by making them uncomfortable, not hurting them, not harming, uncomfortable.
Yep. Give them over to the adversary.
Even if it's nothing more than shaming them for accepting their welfare proudly.
Yep.
Shame them. Make them uncomfortable with it. Don't make them when you make somebody comfortable in their wrongdoing, now you are sinning, because you're helping them sin as well. Yes, sailor son, I am saying I can fix stupid. And you were in the military, you know darn well you can fix stupid. The extent to which you can fix it, that's a different discussion.
That's a different story. But
you can fix stupid.
Yes, you can.
You just got to make it hurt enough.
Yeah, it hurts.
If you've never been in the military, you probably don't understand the saying, you're either going to get smart or strong.
Right.
And then if you get too strong, they find another way to make it hurt.
Right.
So, but yeah, and what you can't fix, it's not stupidity. Seriously, okay, folks, just stay with me for a few minutes. Best way I know how to be a pastor here. I want everybody. If you were in Marine Corps boot camp, I'd say 0, and you say eyeballs, and you snap, sir. You look at me. I want your eyeball. Look, everybody, pay attention. Eyes and ears. Pay attention to people who have Down syndrome, or who have autism, or things like this, mental disabilities. If they have caring people in their life who are patient, they are capable of learning.
Oh, yes.
To the extent that they can learn, we're not talking about that. They can learn. Now, we're talking about the extent to which that doesn't matter. You can learn. Some
of them can actually excel in areas when properly, oriented and stuff. I mean, I remember on America's Got Talent, Cody Lee, is that his name? Great singer and piano player. He's blind and has autism, but I mean, that boy sits in front of a piano, and I mean, it's like, whoa,
Now,
but his mother, I mean, helped him to do that.
Yes. Now, here's the point. I've told you this before on this show. This is one of my problems. I don't understand why each and every one of you, if it's something that is important enough to you, don't spend the time to learn things. Yes, you might learn at different rates. Mm-hmm. I got that.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I will not accept that you cannot learn, especially if you're listening to this show. So in my mind, I will not accept that you cannot learn, which gets me to the real problem. We have chosen the position that we are in this life. All of us. Definitely myself. If you think I'm pointing at you, there are 3 fingers pointing back at me. And I know this. I am well aware of this. This is the point. If you choose the position you are in, you have one of 2 ways to look at this. And this is what I want you to see using this book. The most comfortable one is to adopt a continuous worldview. It's not my fault. It's somebody else's fault. You are now pagan. Don't tell yourself, oh, God wanted me to be poor. No. Yahweh never says that anywhere in his scriptures.
Nope.
Okay. But now if you're transcendent, if you have that transcendent worldview, the scriptures tell you, you live the way I tell you to live, you will be blessed. But that doesn't necessarily mean physically.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're going to be rich. You might be. You might not be.
Yeah.
But he does say he'll give you what you need.
Yeah.
And you will find purpose. You'll find peace, comfort. Even if you're in physical distress because you're in jail being tortured, there is still the joy Paul talked about. There is a purpose to life. There's a direction, an order, an explanation. You have some control over it. Promises of rewards and punishments. That is the only religion that promises this stuff.
Yeah.
The Judeo-Christian culture. Islam does not, as you'll learn here in a couple of weeks or start learning. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Charlie.
you can see the continuous versus transcendent worldview in just the way people handle money. Because if you have a continuous worldview, you're not going to save money. You're just going to spend for today. And, if I run out of money tomorrow, oh no, you know what's good. But transcendent worldview, you realize that, hey, the future is uncertain. And if I put away a little extra money so that, when a rainy day comes along and, something happens where, I have an unexpected expense, then I've got the money to cover that. And money becomes a tool to you. But in the continuous worldview, money is your master. And, and that's two ways of looking at it. So yeah, this is, it permeates life, and you could probably take just about anything really in life and look at it in those simple terms like that and see the difference between the two worldviews.
It's another saying that I heard one time. The man who plants a tree under which shade he will never, rest, has truly started to become a man.
Mm.
The man who plants the tree knowing he'll never rest under its shade has a transcendent worldview.
Yep.
The one who knows, well, I'm never going to be under its shade, so why bother? That's a continuous worldview.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So this is what the book helps with. At least I'm hoping you're getting this out of it. And he's explaining why it's this way. He's explaining the why. And what it comes down to is which master you've chosen. The transcendent creator of the universe, or the God of this world, spirit of the times, the age, the God of the air. Beelzebub.
Yeah.
Which basically means Lord of the Baals, Lord of the Flies. Yeah. Anything else, Charlie, before we wrap it up?
Just Hag Hamatzot Sameach. Last day today, so.
See, I told you, Natasha, you can't speak Hebrew unless you have a bad postnasal drip. Told her that. She said, "Wow." Can't speak German unless you have it either. So
you also compared him to Donald Duck, so
no, Daffy Duck.
Daffy Duck.
Daffy?
Yeah, there's a big difference between
My
Donald and
apologies.
Daffy.
Still not very complimenting. I'll just say that.
I wasn't trying to compliment. I was trying to be accurate.
Yeah,
Exactly.
All right, folks, we're going to get out of here today. We've got service here in a little bit. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate your time. I hope that we serve you. If there's anything else that we can do to help, please email Joe at the Road to Concord or admin at We Who Are Lost. I'm pretty caught up on both of them. I owe one of you a second email. And I'm going to get to that because I finally think I know how to answer it. You know who you are. But otherwise, I think I'm fairly caught up on the emails. It's a joy to actually be here and just share this with those of you, because I wish that we had more feedback than just the comment section. I love hearing the way other people think and see things. And yes, happy birthday to Colonel Bynack. I won't be here tomorrow. Charlie's teaching Hebrew class tomorrow, so I'm going to Colonel Bynack's 100th year birthday. He was my military instructor in my junior ROTC, Marine Junior ROTC class when I was in high school. I thought he had long since been called home. He's a believer, so I'm going to go see him tomorrow. If the one other person who RSVP'd shows up, I'll probably be the second oldest cadet there. If Mr. Harris doesn't make it, I'll be the oldest cadet there. It's kind of cool. Anyway, I enjoy doing what we're doing here. It's a drain. Don't get me wrong. I'm not complaining about that, but oh boy, but it's teaching me. It's teaching me discipline, and it's teaching me service to others, and it's teaching me to stay humble. The more I learn, the less I know. And that's actually a good thing, because the more you understand why I say that, the more humble you become as well, in a good way, not false humility, but in a good way. So if we are feeding you spiritually, intellectually, and any otherwise, please consider at least hitting that like button at the very least. That is your witness to others who stumble across the show that you think the show is worth their time. If you really like it and you think it'll help other people, share it, and feel free to introduce, me however you want. I know that I'm a acquired taste. That's not just a catch line. And I know that I'm a broken human being, and I got that. I understand that. So feel free to introduce your friends and family to me in whatever way you deem necessary. It's not about me. It's about the message. And ultimately about the source of that message, Yahweh, El Elyon, the God Most High, and about his son, Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, Yeshua the Messiah, using their Hebrew names here so that you know exactly who I'm talking about. And to him be the glory. To the extent we hit the target, praise be to him. To the extent we miss, blame it on me, because ultimately that's my name. Whoop, my name right there. Yeah, right there. Got to remember that the screen is flipped here. Otherwise, we love you. Thank you for being here. I will see you again Monday. Charlie will see you tomorrow with Natasha. I'll be at that birthday party. Y'all stay safe. Take care and stay safe. Yahweh bless. Bye-bye.